technique to do 3 touching stain colors. As you can see, it's a live video. It's probably gonna be a longer video, not as long as my last live if you saw that. But real quick, before you skip ahead or anything like that, what I plan to do is utilize the chat feature. So that's different than the comments. So if you are watching this on playback, search around the window. I think it's in the bottom left maybe. You'll see a chat with timestamps next to each comment. And my plan is to type out the step that I'm doing right before I do it. So you can kind of skip around and kind of see that before it goes in there. So anyway, that should help with the playback. The purpose of this video is really for the people who feel like they want to see how something's done a little slower. So I've seen some comments like that. So this is for those people. If you were looking for something a little quicker, I do have my stain methods video that you can go back to. It's 4 methods to stain touching stains, and this is the polyover technique. So this would be an easier difficulty level because I'm going to be using somewhat layerable stains. I have my mock-up here. It was in the thumbnail. Basically, I'm going to be utilizing 3 general finishes stains. I'm going to be using Java, which is like a very dark brown. I'm going to be using a Georgian cherry, which is like a reddish brown. And this is why I'm saying it's somewhat layerable, is the red will slightly tint the other shades. And then I've got a nutmeg, which is going to be kind of like a medium light shade. So we'll kind of dive in. So I tried to prep before the video to kind of have some less painful steps in it. And so what I've already done is I did something called water popping. So I like to water pop every time I use Baltic birch. If you're not familiar with Baltic birch, I kind of explained what that is in a video talking about making an entire set of cornhole boards from a single sheet of plywood. So it is different than birch. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. Baltic birch is very dense and nice, but stain wise, I have challenges with it. So I like to do water popping. So water popping is a simple process. All it is getting your board wet. You'll kind of see it goes from this really light, kind of like a whitish grain to like a darker golden, richer shade while it's wet, and then it'll dry and come back to that whiter shade. So the process is you'll get it all wet, and then whenever it dries, you're gonna sand then. So if you kind of recall, if you're ever brushing poly, you'll kind of notice that the fibers of the wood raise on your first coat. So I am basically taking that and having it before I even start staining. So the water pop will raise the grain, and then whenever I sand, it kind of just has all the grain sticking straight up and gets it super smooth. I would say it's a little smoother than I normally get whenever I don't water pop. So I do that. One, it definitely makes brushing poly a little easier because it's not destroying my foam brush, because I still brush poly. And 2, I do find that it helps a little bit with bleed. So that's why I do that. All right, and then I have laid my stencil, and so I'm gonna get ready and just go ahead and start staining. So I'm gonna be using the polyover technique, and I wanna just describe that real quick because it is interpreted as being magic, and it is not. So there are 4 techniques for touching stain colors. The first would be called stain over, and that would basically be you'd be applying your dark shade of stain, and then you're gonna let it fully dry for a day or more, and then you will peel up your stencil for the next lighter shade, and you would stain that over top of both. The reason you have to wait is if you stain too soon, your second shade will actually just like erase the first one. It doesn't react well in layers, so you actually have to let the first one dry before you can layer stain. So that would be like the stain over, and it is a very like long but easy process. Polyover is the exact same thing, except the poly just removes that waiting time for dry. So it doesn't create some sort of magical possibilities necessarily. It really just speeds up the process, and that's it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dive in and start staining my first darkest shade, and I'm gonna layer lighter shades on top of that. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Just a heads up, every time you see me use this vinyl roller, just turn down your volume. I apologize. If you wanna donate a roller to the Cornhole Collective, I'm sure many people would thank you. I'm too cheap and haven't gotten another one. Actually, before I dive in, I am going to try to see if I can find my video real quick so I can see any chat comments. All right, I'm not connected to the internet. That's real fun. I probably will not play with that too much. Actually, I kind of have to though, don't I? Oh, that's a bummer. All right, my phone's got an internet connection, but I don't have one on my computer. I will check back in there and try to describe what I've done. All right, well, that chat feature is not going to be working too great. So the first thing I like to do is I have laid down my stencil. As you might see, there are some wrinkles in the vinyl. I had a comment on my last video that it was nice to see that other people make mistakes, and I have made tons already and I haven't even started. One is I didn't lay the stencil super well, so I do have these little wrinkles in it. I have tried to get out what I can, and then I saw that I deleted my contour before I cut the vinyl, so I had to hand cut that before I started my live. But what I'm going to do now is I've applied my stencil, and a lot of people would just go ahead and dive in and start staining. I personally like to use a heat gun. A hairdryer would work just fine. I'm not looking for a lot of heat, but what I'm going to do is, especially the areas that I'm going to be staining, I'm going to hit that vinyl with a heat gun. Basically what it does is the heat just really kind of starts softening up the vinyl and softening up the glue. And then I'm going to use my vinyl roller. This is called a speed ball. I'll try to go back and add a link to our supplies list, but it's cornholecollective.com/supplies. We have all the supplies that we generally recommend, organized by like what phase of the board build you're doing to kind of help find stuff. So if you're interested in any of these things, they're all listed there. But sweet, I'm back online. I apologize to you that are watching it live. This is just to make playback less painful. Sweet. And if anybody has any feedback on volume or framing or anything, feel free to chime in so you don't have to suffer through the entire video. All right, so where was I? I think I was talking about applying heat here. So it's all going to be very clear on our supplies list if you're interested in any of that. But I like to do that right before I stain. I can already see, especially like where there were little wrinkles, it doesn't take much, but the vinyl just kind of keeps popping up right there. So if I were to stain right there, I would get a nice surface bleed immediately. Even like really tight folds like I've got down here, it could just easily bleed underneath that. Anytime like it's cooler weather, the vinyl won't stick as well. And oddly, like whenever it's really hot, I find my vinyl doesn't work well. It seems to have like a very tight window of temperature range for it to work. So I like to use heat. It seems to just, even though it doesn't work well in hot, for some reason a heat gun kind of helps you out. Again, I'm not just blasting it because I can melt the vinyl, but it basically is going to soften the glue. I'm going to roll it and it's going to get a nice little paint barrier. And then you're actually going to see that the vinyl will even like kind of get into the contours of the wood and it'll just take on that shape. So it kind of just really helps you see that it is really effective. So I'm going to do that. So I apologize for this noise. Feel free to go ahead and turn your volume down for about 2 minutes. So my name is Hunter Richmond, and if you were to go search me on Venmo, I believe these are about like $12. Feel free to donate one. So anyway, oh sorry, by the way, I'm responding to comments in the chat. So if you're watching this on playback, you don't see the comments unless you turn on the chat. So otherwise, I just look like more of a weirdo talking to myself. But I'm responding to the people busting my chops about that wheel. So. Real quick, I do want to go back and highlight one of my errors. So if you saw in the thumbnail, I have the team name down here at the very bottom of the board. I will be staying at Java, but there's going to be a raw unstained contour border. For some reason, I didn't seem to notice when I was trying to cut my image to cut down on double cuts. I removed pieces that I don't need, and I actually removed the background, which had the contour on it. So I don't have the contour, and then before I started this video, I was like, oh, I'll just go cut it by hand, which I did. So this is a lookout for just staining in general. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be staining right next to a cut line. So basically all I'm saying is I'm going to stain these letters. That's super easy, but the contour cut line that I just put in there is now like kind of like a line in the vinyl. And if I stain too messily over there with the darkest shade, because the next stain color to the contour is going to be a very like a lighter shade by contrast, you will get like some seepage of the thinnest of that gel stain. It will just kind of seep through those cut lines, and it is very hard to get out because it's just the liquid part of that gel stain, and it seeps down quick and seeps down hard. So in general, that would be a big lookout, is try to watch out for your cut lines if it's going to be in an area that's like raw, or like if you were trimming something and you accidentally cut through vinyl and it was like in a raw unstained area, but you're staining, anyway, whatever, you'll learn it whenever you get there, but just try to look out for staining over a cut line, because some of your stain will go down through there. So if that's in a raw area, that will suck. All right. So I got these cool little Sureline stain lids, and because my gel stains dry out, and these don't do anything, so that sucks. So I got a few. So I like to shake mine up a little bit before I get started. I like to use vinyl gloves, keep it from getting all over my hands, as I touch all kinds of stuff. Real quick too, if you have feedback, please include it in the chat. I do plan to do a couple videos this week, and I feel like I'm learning a little something each time. So anything I can do to kind of make these a little bit more functional, feel free to add that in. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, like sometimes my cut lines in the vinyl, because there's a comment on there talking about the mask cuts and everything. Like those, I mean, it does seep. Typically, your cut lines are going to be like dividing two different stain shades. So like usually it's not going to be too noticeable. This one though, it's going to be like, it's going to be dividing raw unstained wood and a light stain, but the stain that will be seeping is going to be dark. So that kind of sucks. The areas that I tend to have the biggest issue is like anytime I've had to correct a problem and I put down tape and I'm cutting it, and I end up having a cut line that's going to be like kind of in the middle of like a raw area. I don't know why those would even exist, but for some reason they seem to, and they are like impossible to get rid of. So it is just different than normal paint bleed or stain bleed, because this goes deep into the fibers. But I'm going to get started. So I use a foam mattress or furniture pad for staining. So this is basically a 2 foot by 6 foot foam pad. You can buy foam in little chunks, which I found out after I ordered this, but this is cheaper per square foot or inch or whatever. And I've had this, and I would estimate I'm at about 75 uses out of this. and all I've got is just like a little chunk of the top missing. So I just basically reach in and just tear off a little piece of foam, and that is my stain applicator. Because I was using terry cloth waxing pads before, and those were pretty expensive and pretty big. So. Right. So yeah, I've got this really thick film on top. I just moved recently, so I actually haven't used any stains in about 8 months. So this is a little worse than if you were just storing it. I'm sure those Sureline lids would probably be more functional and short term. But, all right. I just pretty much get stain on my hands and just change the glove because you end up touching something. So, all right, here's my lid. Just something I do whenever I'm staining is like right now. I shook it up before. It had like kind of like a false lid from the dried skin, but I find that like if you were to go back to another one of my videos called I think it's called like preventing stain bleed or something like that. One of the steps is applying stain dryly, and I find that very hard if you were to dip this into the actual stain. So something else I like to do is shake the stain and then use the lid as like a paint palette. So then I can just kind of dab my stain in there, and then I've got a lot less stain on my sponge here. Just in case you're curious, like the glistening part there is just like a little bit of just stain on top. It's not even like a lot of stain, but that's wet. That would definitely be considered wet. And if I were to go touch an edge, that just has like a lot of moisture it's gonna bleed. Gel stain's like training wheels for stain, but that will bleed a little bit. So to stain dryly, in that video I'll kind of highlight it, but basically what I would want to do is start out in an open area. I don't have any real open area here. I've got like a little circle in the very center, but I am fortunate to have a lot of used area here that does not have cut lines. And what I can do is just like kind of rub my stain there, and now it's quite a bit drier. It's still going to be kind of moist. It's glistening a little bit, but it doesn't have the glob on there anymore. So now I can I can stain a little more easily. Grain direction would definitely be something to kind of be paying attention to. So you'll see this logo has all kinds of straight lines, somewhat with the grain, but definitely here it's very perpendicular. The stripes here on the side go with the grain, and it's going to be kind of hard to get bleed there. So I kind of pay attention to that a little bit, because you are going to need to be even drier if you're not going with the grain. So most of this is, I guess, technically against it. So I'm going to just dry off just a little bit more, but I'll start staining. I find that the pressure you apply also helps. So this is a foam, basically like a sponge. So it's soaking up stain. So like as you go, you are going to need to start pressing down harder to get some of that stain out. But if you start out and you push down real hard, it's kind of the same as if I had that glove on there. It'll just be like forcing a lot of liquid into it, and you're going to get some bleed. So. So I got a question about sponge versus rag. So I'm not a huge fan of the sponge. Like, it's not like anything special here. The only thing I like about the sponge is it's just like a solid little piece. The thing I hate about a rag is it flops around, and I am just not good at like keeping that constantly controlled and balled up in my hand. I tend to always just have like a little piece of that rag that kind of flop out when I don't want it to, and it just drags across something I didn't mean for it to, because I do tend to do a lot more intricate stains. This is like a reasonably complex design, but like for me it's like kind of medium easy for what I tend to do. So really I like the sponge, just like not so much for the experience of the staining, but just because, I mean, I'm not going to accidentally like drape part of it and drag it through something else. I had a question if I had a Modelo before I started. I definitely did, and I will probably have a couple breaks here where I'll go get some more. Unfortunately, it's not sponsored by Modelo, but if anybody knows someone from Modelo and they want to highlight their product, I'm happy to help out to my dozens of followers. So the lids are not actually on the supply list. I can add those, but they're just called Sureline lids, and they're just in the paint department at Lowe's. But yeah, I don't know, they're okay. I do tend to also be a little messy around the lids on mine, my stain, and one of the reasons I always get the dry out is the crud that builds up. Like, that's just despicable. But it is my most common stain, but like it just junks up the little indentation for the lid. But anyway, I'm gonna start staining real quick. So this isn't that fine of a detail. However, where I don't have like a big open space, it kind of acts like that. Like, it's just like a little hard to not hit the edges of your masked area with some wet stain. So what was my train of thought here? So like basically I do start off pressing soft and just try to drag it along a big area, but don't be afraid to go a little light and just have to hit it again. One common issue that I see with people who are really trying to avoid stain bleed is they will be waiting until it's super dry and they're gonna kind of go along an edge and they're just gonna be pressing really hard, just trying to milk every little bit of stain they can out of the rag or sponge or whatever. And it's just like they're not really getting the stain buildup that they need to get the color that they're wanting. It just ends up being like kind of faint. And so it's super clean, but it is really noticeable because you will tend to have like maybe like a big open area, and then whenever they're getting close to the intricate detail, all of a sudden that bold dark stain color just kind of got really faint and it just looks smudgy around the outside, kind of like a hazy line. And to be honest, it is quite noticeable. So what I find is continue doing exactly what you're doing, and then just let it dry a little bit and then go back and just hit it up with a little bit more stain. So it doesn't have to be like full boldness on the first pass. Because like once you get some stain on there and it starts drying, basically you're kind of like clogging up some fiber. I'm making up like honestly the science behind this. Like, this is just my experience, but it's my like kind of like my observation is it does seem to like kind of clog up some of the grain. So like bleed is less likely. So like you just get like a little bit of a light stain in there. You can't come in super wet on the second pass, but as you apply more stain, you can build it up to that like kind of heavy amount of stain, but it's not gonna bleed as if you had done it on one pass. Yeah, so Sean, I don't know if you asked that before I started talking, but yeah, it's like I'll kind of use a little bit of the consistent tone. Like I try to get like a little bit of a consistent tone on my first pass, but like I'm not too worried about it, especially if it's like really intricate. Like I will just try to get like some on there. Right now it was a little wetter than it needed to be. I probably should have dabbed it over here. But instead I just decided to wipe everywhere really lightly, kind of drying it down, kind of got like a faint covering, but like I'm just trying to get all the excess stain off of my rag or sponge, foam, whatever it is I'm using. And then I just kind of go back and kind of keep hitting it. And then you do just kind of need to stop and take a look and just see if you see that faintness. And if you're not sure, just go ahead and just hit up that little fine detail again. Kind of going at it dry still, but you will just be like kind of building up that boldness. And that's where somebody is gonna start looking a little bit more talented, is those like bolder lines. It's the overly cautious, like kind of faint blend out around in the fine detail. They definitely, it just looks like something is off. And as talented as those people are to get such clean lines, it's just that little like weak fade out of your color around the border. It's not like you look at it and you're just like talking trash on it. It just looks like something is off, and it is just going to be dissatisfying, honestly, to look at. So kind of has like a little bit of like a less talented vibe coming from it, even though it may have been very challenging to get that result. So I don't know, honestly, I wasn't super stoked in this like lumber price hike. It does seem like that some of the lumber that's getting shoved out there is not the highest of quality. And if you watched my last stain video, I was actually terrified the entire time that I was doing a 5-hour stain video on a set of boards I was going to be throwing away, because it just had every sign that it was going to bleed. And this is the next sheet in the stack, and honestly, like, this is the most exciting grain I think I've ever seen on Baltic birch, which means it's like okay, but it's I don't know, pretty stoked on that. Hopefully I didn't just jinx myself, because I don't want to throw away this set on a time crunch. But yeah, so that was basically it. That was kind of like a bigger open area. And then I do find like just having like your mock-up, I don't know how you guys mock it up. I attempt to mock up as close to the final result as possible. One, it helps me choose my stain colors more accurately, because I'm not mocking up what I hope to see. I'm mocking up like using previous sets of boards as references to match my colors. But I need this handy with me all the time to, I don't know, while I'm staining, just so I don't do something stupid. Because you might notice, like, hey, I've got the first color weeded, why wouldn't I just stain everything? I actually weeded the border to help me align my stencil, but the border is a different color. It's going to be the second shade. I'm glad I verbalized that, because I'm going to actually have to cover that back up whenever I poly it. But anyway, I just find this is super easy to have up, and I installed this obnoxious monitor system to make YouTube Live a little simpler. But anyway, that helps. I'm using my phone, which is what I normally look at. But I'm noticing this doesn't have a screensaver, so it is simpler than my phone for sure. So like, here's like kind of a good example. Like, I definitely need more stain, but like all of these curves and the letters definitely make this like a lot more of like a bleed friendly zone. So I am really just, I don't know, like I got chunks of my sponge coming off, because I'm going at this pretty hard with a very dry sponge. And honestly, I got more buildup than I expected. I thought it was gonna be pretty faint and be another example of where I might come in. But right now, I'm just kind of continuing to follow up the coats with just this super, super dry sponge. And it really kind of seems like I'm getting full saturation. I might risk it here on the L and just try to add some more stain. The reason I would choose the L is the L is going with the grain, and it's gonna be like the hardest area to get bleed. So I might just add a little more stain there, just as a test to see if I'm just being lazy or not. I'm just gonna see if the L looks any better with a little bit more stain. It honestly doesn't, but might as well be safe, I guess. All right. So next up is going to be the team name, which has that contour with the little line I was talking about. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna intentionally get myself in the same position I was just at with the city name, and I'm gonna have just like the driest freaking sponge you've ever seen. So I can try to eliminate that stain type that I was talking about that would actually bleed through a cut line, and I'm just gonna hopefully get like a reasonable little coat here. So yeah, I don't know, hopefully even the light stain might even clog some of that cut line. That would be fantastic, so I won't get any bleed from that as well. if you ever do like a super intricate design, 2 tips. One was just verbalized by my buddy Daniel Kane. He's K2 boards from Oceanside, but you know, for weeding, like a little tip is definitely like, you know, kind of weed some of the parts that might make it easy to place the stencil, but like for really fine detail, weeding it while it's on the board could be easier. And then a little tip I've got for weeding and finding stuff as well is use the dry sponge or dry rag and kind of go over your board, and you'll see that your cut lines actually get highlighted. So I mean, you could actually do that before you even apply it to the board, but I find just like the slightest amount of like just kind of like stain just to dirty up the vinyl will highlight all those little fine details that makes weeding that super simple. So I got a question about how much lumber has gone up. So I actually didn't buy lumber since November, and I was buying it from Soroyan Hardwoods in San Marcos, California. And I was, I think the time before I had bought it in November, like the time before that, I think I was paying like $25 per sheet of, actually it was $26 per Baltic birch. I think in November I got up to $33, but I moved, so it's kind of hard to compare. I believe they're definitely higher now, but they held out for a really long time. This I just paid $55 for at my new local one called Aura Hardwood here in San Luis Obispo. And they haven't restocked this thickness. I got another thickness for my walls, and just in the month that I've been that I was buying wood and had to go back and restock it, had gone up $10 a sheet. So pretty crazy. From what I understand, lumber prices are dropping, but it's going to take a long time to hit the stores. So yeah, so you probably won't actually see that lumber price drop anytime soon, but I think that would be at the end of the summer, because all the stores allegedly paid more to get that as well, so they're going to sell through that before they're going to lower those prices down. But I don't know, there's different strategies for buying wood. I mean, like definitely shopping around. I don't know, just like hitting up 2 different branches of the same freaking lumber yard, Soroyan Hardwoods, for example. So I'm now 300 miles away from my old lumber yard, and there's one that's like 100 miles away or 150. And they are definitely like noticeably higher, where like I was gonna pay additional shipping fees if I could to get that wood delivered to me from my old yard, but ended up they had a supply issue and I couldn't get it by the time I decided to pull the trigger. But you got that. Another thing would be like possibly buying in quantity. So if you go and you're just asking about a single sheet, you're gonna pay a lot more. Like if you were to go buy a sandwich, for example, versus buying all the ingredients separately, it's like you're gonna pay a lot more for the one piece. So buying in bulk definitely will kind of reduce you. Another tip is like definitely like learning how your lumber yard works. So it's Soroyan Hardwoods in San Marcos. They're not sponsoring this, but they're great. They have great people, so I like to give them a shout out. The way they worked is you would actually get locked in at your price. So I went and I bought 2 pallets because I'm a weirdo and I don't have that volume to need 2 pallets, but I bought 2 pallets. And I got locked in at a low price, and then next time I go and get a single sheet, I pay the same price as I did when I got 2 pallets. So so that was kind of a cool thing to know. So anyway, it's just, I don't know, there's just different things. So kind of chatting them up and getting to know your lumber yard is really helpful, rather than just trying to call and get information, especially like this time with like all the lumber prices. It's like their phones just kind of going nuts the whole time. Yeah, so I got like Sean in here saying he last got Baltic Birch in December 2020 for $26 a sheet, and then someone in Northern Illinois, Bibba Boards is they paid $65 a sheet. Um, I don't know. I kind of feel like we do okay in California because it's got like we're near the ports and stuff, but again, like you'll just see like I mean it's like it kind of depends too like on how many middlemen you have. So like the place where Sean goes, so I used to live near Sean, and we went to the same lumberyard once, and it's like right next to a railroad that would go and connect next to the port. So it has just so few hands getting on it by the time it gets there that we're paying like $25 a sheet in December, which is like a year after the pandemic started. And then you have like other places like in the middle of nowhere where gas is like 15 cents a gallon or something. They're paying like $150 a sheet right now. It's kind of silly. I just think like, but you are paying a lot for shipping costs, and I do believe you have those places like the lumberyard that's next to the railroad can obviously just import massive quantities and then kind of distribute to smaller places around it. They could possibly reduce their own shipping costs by like getting it through them. So who knows what kind of stuff is going on? Because like even Home Depot, if you ever go special order something, they're reaching out to big lumber yards around them. So you get middleman by, or you can get middleman by a few people and increase your price. So, all right. So if you happen to notice that I move on to another step and I don't hit the chat, I would appreciate a little reminder. So I'm going to just kind of clue in there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mask this, and then I'm going to hit it with my first coat of poly. Appreciate you guys chatting me up because I can't listen to music while I'm doing this. Because if you listen to music, it gets picked up in the microphone, and it's like copyright infringement for YouTube. So then your stuff just gets deleted. It's just super boring. So I appreciate that. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be hitting this with aerosol poly. And aerosol poly, the function of that is it is just reducing this dry time. If I want without the poly, if I want to do stain over, I need to wait for this to dry for about 24, possibly more hours. What happens in less time is, I might actually be able to show you on one of these little stain sets, but you'll see that like, even though the next shade I'm gonna do is pretty dark and red, it actually is gonna kind of just like, they're gonna kind of cancel each other out a little bit. There will definitely be no definition. It will somewhat blend, but you're not gonna have this like same tone of darkness. For some reason, it's almost like the color disappears and you just have this weird oil that is like kind of just clogging up the wood now, and like stain is just not taking there anymore. So I'm sure there's probably a solution to that or something, like if you wait a long time, but the whole reason we're layering stains and making these mistakes is so we don't have that time, so we're not going to stumble across those solutions. So the right way to do it would be to wait for a very long time, and I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this with aerosol poly. So I'm doing this before I weed the next section. If you're not familiar with what weeding is removing the vinyl where you're going to be staining. So I've already done that to help me place the stencil. So I weeded my next color in a certain area. I did strategize it, and I made a manual cut to end, so I didn't weed all the way up to the letters, so I didn't want to risk staining in the wrong area. But I got enough where I could place my stencil. So what I'm going to do before I do anything is just make sure that all of my unstained wood is protected from the poly. The poly will have a little bit of an overspray, like just kind of like a little bit of like a cloud, even like kind of invisible vapors. And it's like that stuff could settle somewhere. And if you did get that, or your nozzles aren't always going to be super clean, you can get like a little, just like a little glob could just fly out somewhere that you might not even see it, and it will just land, and then all of a sudden you just don't have stain take there. Had that happen, super embarrassing. But yeah, like, I don't know, it's like you can't tell it happened until after it's like way too late. So best to be cautious. Daniel's here, letting us know his fake internet name is. I thought I had called you by the wrong name or something. I thought you were calling me out in the middle of my video. Oh, that's funny. Whenever I do stuff like this, though, I'll just kind of like do a light press down. Not that you're gonna really have any issues by pushing down hard, but obviously if I had like a more intricate design and I press this tape down, it could stick really well. And then whenever you're peeling it back up, then all of a sudden it could be like pulling up some of your details, and then you're having to fight all of that. Or it could just pull up the actual vinyl that, like, you know, this big solid chunk, it could pull it. And whenever you pull vinyl without the transfer tape, it's now malleable or flexible or whatever, and you can stretch it out, so it's not going to lay back down in the same place that it was. So I'm going to just do a soft little lay down because I'm not staining a line there or anything. I'm just going to kiss it with some poly. So just a little look out there. Another thing with Baltic is, strong as it is, the top veneer is just super fragile. And I have had, so frog tape is not very sticky, but I have had frog tape give me the worst splinter that I've ever had. It was a set with just 2 pieces of tape, and when I peeled up that one of my 2 pieces of tape, it pulled out a splinter that I swear was like at least 8 inches, but it was like probably 3/16 thick. Like, it was so gnarly. It's just kind of embarrassing to scrap like a set. So I don't know, if you don't have to, don't stick it really tight to the fibers. Yeah, just a little lookout. I'll move on now. Right on. I really appreciate you guys that are like tuning in to watch this stuff. Like, it's, I don't know, it means a lot, because like I just never would have imagined that this would be like the kind of video somebody would want to watch. But seriously, if you have any feedback, like, if you could, feel free to let me know. Anything that can make it more enjoyable, or possibly anything that's happening that makes it helpful, feel free to comment that. All right. So this is kind of a hard thing to verbalize and explain. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a chance that I'm not gonna spray this on my board, but I'm gonna use some black spray paint real quick. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to show you like how much poly that we're trying to put down. So again, all right. Well, sorry. Let's just go to the poly real quick. I'm using a water-based poly. It honestly just doesn't really matter what you use. Don't use an oil-based poly. If you're gonna use an oil-based finishing poly, just don't use this method. This method isn't gonna work. So we've got an oil-based stain, and we're gonna put something water-based over top of it, which is like fundamentally like a no-no. There's a lot of stuff going on. The main issue, again, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just speaking from experience and my analysis of that experience, as well as like information to get from other people. But there's a thing called off-gassing. So we've got an oil-based stain, and this is gonna be giving off gas. I assume is how I got that name. The first 24 hours is gonna be like the most extreme period. So that is definitely something that's gonna cause you some issues, okay? So luckily, it's going to bleed if you apply poly to it within 24 hours. This would be like with a brush, okay? If you apply it with a brush, you will be smearing the poly because it's still technically wet. And so that's kind of like gonna keep us from like ever really getting into trouble with that. However, this method is going to tempt you to just like rush some stuff. Just don't do that. Don't, I'll just explain what will happen. All right, so like basically if you fully coat this, you're going to be like just kind of encapsulating something like, I don't know, whatever, you're just encapsulating it, but it's giving off this gas, right? So what's gonna happen is your poly also like is water-based, so oil and water don't mix well, so it's not going to really stick. So basically what's gonna happen, in my experience, is you're going to end up sanding later. Like whenever you're doing your real poly, you've already laid down a bunch and it's looking great and you just saved a ton of time. Then you start sanding it and all of a sudden, boom, poly is starting to peel in these areas where off-gassing was occurring. So that is the downside. That's what we're trying to avoid. We don't want to get in on any of that. So that would be a lookout for you spray guys. If you do have spray, like spraying too soon, you just run that risk. If you're spraying like within this 24-hour off-gas period. From what I understand, it actually off-gasses for like up to like a week. So we're kind of really just playing with fire by polying anytime soon, but pretty much the majority of it's happening all in the first day or so. Real quick, all these times that I'm throwing out, I'm in Southern California, it's warm and it's dry, and it's for pretty much every color except for black, and this is gel stain. Black for some reason takes longer, and if it's humid and cold or whatever in one of those other terrible places in the country, you're probably gonna have different times, just kind of play with it, but that's a good jumping off point. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to show you how much poly we're trying to apply. So if you do too much, you just experience what I was talking about. But if you go too light, you don't really do anything. So like I was saying, if we didn't have poly and I try to do my next shade, it will just kind of erase this. I think I'm going to demonstrate that real quick just here, if I can. Oh, cool, more stain skin. Oh, son of a biscuit. I'm gonna be cheap. I'm gonna save some of that. Oh my God. All right. That's a lot of stain. All right. Oh man, the chat's pretty funny, guys. Okay, so too soon, you didn't close the off-gassing, you had the peel stuff. Not too soon, too heavy. Too light, then it's basically like you don't have poly there at all. So what I'm doing is I've got this nice red that's dark, and if I do it where the other dark was, all right, it's not making my point, but the dark is completely gone. It just is giving the sense that it's taking the second shade. That doesn't really happen on wood. All right, ignore that. You're gonna take my word for it. If you don't have enough poly, it also ruins stain. So what I wanna do is, rather than trying to verbalize some sort of like clear amount of liquid we're gonna do, I'm gonna do some black. So I've got a white thing here. You've all painted a room that was dark and you're trying to get it light and like it doesn't go great, okay? So all right, so right here, I just laid down some black. All right, so the majority of this is way heavier than what we're really trying to go for. Like you can't see the white anymore. So that is kind of an example of going a little too heavy. Like you don't have to go that heavy. What you're going for is more like right here in this little transition area. Like you're just trying to protect the majority of that stain. So in this example, hopefully this isn't confusing, but in this example, the previous shade of stain would be like the white. So I'm going for this like kind of like, I don't know, like maybe I'm seeing like more than 50% of the black speckles. Like I'm going for that zone here, not out here that's too light and here's too dark. I mean, you're not definitely ruining your board by like going one direction or the other, but like that's the target zone. And so what you're gonna be doing is you're basically locking in the stain in a certain area so your second shade isn't gonna touch the first shade. All right, so that should prevent you from like kind of like losing that first shade. So make sure I get rid of this paint. I almost feel like that experiment wasn't worth the risk there. So I'm going to lay down this first one real quick. All right, so I obviously sprayed more there than I did on the black, but like I'm kind of doing it from further away and also at an angle. I was kind of really close on the black because I didn't want to risk spraying that onto my board. But all right, I've laid down a little bit. Honestly, I'm going to just kind of do another little coat there. So I just from my previous experience, like I know I'm going to be fine on this. Well, I hope I'm going to be fine on this. I'm pretty confident I'm going to be. But another little lookout here is with an intricate design, you're probably going to have a bunch of cut lines here, and you may do multiple layers of poly, because I'm going to do a poly on this, and then I'm going to stain my red, and then I'm going to poly on that, and then I'm going to stain my light brown. But like sometimes I might have more colors. So the more poly you're doing, you are filling those cut lines with poly. And the downside there is it just like kind of levels and gets smooth, and then you just don't see where to weed anymore. And you get into some trouble. Going a little too heavy again, in addition to the off-gassing, is you start to build up like a film of poly. And what that will do is whenever you remove your vinyl, is all of a sudden now you have this little sheet of poly as you fully kind of like closed off. And then it will just peel away with the vinyl whenever you remove it. So anyway, I just did kind of like a light dusting, and I'm gonna do a little less this time, just a little bit more. All right, we're gonna call that done. So that is poly over. All right, so in this video, I also described this as I'm doing somewhat layerable colors here. So I've got a dark brown and I've got a light brown. So what happens is with the stain over, which is the method without the poly, you lay down your dark and you're gonna lay down the light over top of it. Those technically, like, even if they're similar colors, are like interacting with each other. So I do have a light brown going over a dark brown, which probably means that the dark that should still be looking dark afterwards is still going to be looking dark, but it did get affected by a little bit of light brown. It's just where they're both shades of brown, they still look right, and like you're not going to notice that change. So that is what I would consider layerable, is a dark and a light brown. I've got the somewhat layerable color in here, which is called Georgian Cherry, and it is like a very reddish brown. You can't tell from that just looks hot pink, but it is like this rich reddish brown, but it's technically a brown, and it's got a little bit of red tint. What I'm going to do though, the downside is it is going to give like a little bit of a red impact to this darker area. So one of the things you want to do with a poly over is you just, if you're using layerable colors, you would just want to go ahead and completely coat the first shade. So whatever effect it is having on the color, it's just going to be consistent, and then that means you're just not going to see it as easily. So if you're going to have like a negative effect on the color, then you want to minimize overlap, but I would call that a non-layerable stain color, and I would be using a different method. So I want to just stress I'm using layerable colors here. And then the last one is I'm going to have a light brown, which is going to go over that reddish brown. So technically that's just kind of like a somewhat layerable, and it's just going to be kind of browning up my reddish brown to make it slightly less red. So I'm okay with that shift. It is still going to have a pretty bold, like, kind of reddish tint to kind of give the effect for this this team color. So I just want to stress that it's not magical and doesn't like allow additional like things that shouldn't happen to happen, like yellow going over a black is my favorite example, because that creates diarrhea green. So I learned that on a set, and it wasn't a pretty effect. Okay, so now I've laid down poly, and now the idea here is this next shade is not going to touch the first shade, okay? Or at least not much. But that doesn't mean that the color effect like doesn't still layer. I'm now tinting the poly. I'm going to be tinting the poly a red shade over top of the dark brown, so like the color change is still the same. Like you are affecting that poly. Now, like full disclosure, there are a couple other builders that are using like magic erasers to go back and hit the first shade that had the poly over to get the second shade off of it, and allegedly that works. I hope to experiment with that in the next live video I do, but for now I am not going to try to promote that as a possibility. If they're not layerable stain colors, you want to use remask. So I'm asked if I'm using satin or gloss. So I am using a satin here. Honestly, like a gloss probably would be smarter. I like a satin poly, and I think I just don't think hard whenever I'm shopping and picked up satin. Satin is going to have like a bit of a texture to it. Like the less sheen you have, like kind of like the more texture you have, like a matte, you can definitely feel it. So that texture is basically like, you know, just not smooth. So it's just areas for stain to get caught. So I guess technically I would probably be getting more of a color change effect. I'm not super worried about it though, because I do use layerable colors for the most part, except for my next video. But like right now I'm using pretty much layerable colors, so I'm not too worried about the color effect going on. I actually plan to fully coat this bad boy. But if I was really worried about like, I needed to get it off, like gloss would probably be my best bet because it's smoother and I might be able to whiten the majority of the stain off. However, it is going to very much tint that poly still. So hopefully that helps. All right. If you're not subscribed to my channel, it means a lot actually if you do subscribe. Definitely I look at that number every morning and it just makes me feel all proud of myself. No, but seriously, it does open up more options on YouTube. Your subscription to my channel tells the YouTube algorithm that my video is enjoyable, and they will actually somewhat promote my video by like just kind of sharing it more. Kind of no subscriptions, no likes, no comments make it seem very uninteresting, and the algorithm will actually kind of hide me even from people searching potentially for that exact video. So your subscription helps a lot. If you don't want to see all my stuff but you want to help me out, subscribe, and then it'll just show up on your feed. And then if you really do like this stuff, like for example tomorrow I plan to do the pair board to this, which is going to be the Oregon, no I'm sorry, I don't want to mention the team name. But anyway, it's the combination of colors is going to be yellow and green, and I'm going to try to experiment with the poly over with non-layerable colors. I hope to be able to do that tomorrow. So if you're interested in a video like that, turn on notifications and it'll just notify you, I assume through like an email or something, that I've released some new very long video. So, all right, just a heads up, I'm going to be weeding my next color, and then I'm going to be using that loud tool again. So I'm not going to talk anymore for a minute, so feel free to turn down your volume. Just in case you're curious, I just use heat to just get the last little bit of that poly to dry, because I'm getting ready to, I'm like weeding colors right next to it that are in that poly area. And by even using a little like dental pick thing here, I can drag some of that poly in there, and basically it's just going to kind of maybe do like a little wipe of poly that I might see because it won't absorb stain there. So just trying to dry it so I don't drag any poly. All right, so I did go pretty light on my poly. However, I would say that my cut lines are hard to see over here. Right here, I'm very fortunate. I don't know if you noticed that I just like about had a heart attack, but I thought I'd weeded the wrong area. But it turns out I didn't. But where I don't have like touching vinyl, like it's very easy to obviously see where I'm gonna weed here. It's just down here, I have filled those cut lines, so it's pretty hard to see. Luckily, I know it's a line going through it, so I know where to like guess at it to be, but for detail, that would be pretty challenging. So it lets me know that I'm definitely not gonna be like smearing any stain because I've put down a little too much poly. Alright, so I got most of that fine detail. I started to pull up this big area, and honestly, it was going pretty good. It just felt like it was resisting. Kind of reminded me, for the fine detail, I mean, I probably could have kept doing it, but I was just weeding vinyl that's next to other vinyl. So, like, fiber pull is not really like a huge factor there, but here, definitely where I'm weeding it next to stained wood. That's going to be some fiber pull that will stick out like a sore thumb because you're going to be like ripping off the stain. If you do it before stain, I mean, you can still see the effect afterwards, but it's not nearly as bad. So I'm going to bring out my heat gun again, and I like to apply heat when removing it. So real quick, to kind of show you that you don't have to have a heat gun, because if you have too much heat, what will happen is it does melt it, and then it just falls apart, okay? So there's really not a downside to that except for like a lack of convenience. So what you're really going for here, you can't heat the entire area and then let go, because like even this is already cooled. What you want to go for is, I just kind of move it along. So like a hair dryer would obviously work, but I'm just kind of just slightly warming the areas that I'm about to start pulling. So by trying to look at myself in the camera and do that heat, I could see that I was like kind of pulling at a weird angle. I'm gonna try not to block the camera so you can see what I'm gonna do, but it was getting a little reckless and I'm not gonna continue that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to hit it from another angle. It's kind of hard to do the heat back here because I'm gonna be hitting mostly the vinyl I'm pulling, which will just melt my vinyl. I want to hit it from over here so I can hit the vinyl I'm about to pull, so it'll soften that glue and hopefully just kind of like soften its hold on the wood fibers is the goal of what I'm doing here. One of the fears you could have, and I hopefully just kind of debunked it a little bit with this melted vinyl, is you could be fearing that by softening that glue, some of the glue might stay on the board and like you're gonna have like a residue. I can't speak for other vinyls. This is Oracal or whatever it's called, 631 indoor removable vinyl. And in my experience, I do not get vinyl residue. If you do, it's I can't speak definitively about it, but it would probably be more likely due to that roll. Because I've been hearing recently from people in my our group. If you don't know what group I'm talking about, it's the Cornhole Collective on Facebook. Cornholecollective.com, and look for any Facebook logo. It'll take you to our group. It's awesome. Join. It's fantastic. But anyway, so people in the group have been talking about some residue being left behind by Oracal 631, and it is just happening to them on every single set. They're not using a heat gun to get that effect. It seems to be like more like a defective roll. So anyway, it could happen with other vinyl. So real quick, like you don't want to use like exterior vinyl like Oracal 651. That would be exterior permanent vinyl, so it will leave behind residue and it will destroy your boards more easily because it's not designed to be removed. So this is designed to be removed, so it shouldn't be leaving behind residue at all. And then in my experience, even with the heat gun, even where I melt it, I don't get residue stuck on the board. All right, so I'm now ready to stain my next shade, which is going to be Georgian Cherry, which is like the reddish color. So now I'm big on testing, so I would normally advise someone to use like a circle cutout or the hole cutout from the board to test this, all right, to kind of really see the effect. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a test on my board. The reason I'm choosing to do it on the board is just kind of strategizing like the way I'm thinking through this, like it's not going to cause me any issues. And then another benefit, since I can do it on the board without causing myself issues, is I have a larger area to test. Often things will look better on a small circle cutout. I don't know why, but like I've tested things and it seems like it's going to work, and I go to like a bigger area and it didn't work quite as well. So it kind of gives me like a bigger sense of what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get a sense of how much color change I'm going to get with the red. I just want to know that for my own personal benefit, but also it would tell me what I need to hit this with red. Like I don't have any red around this, like do I really need to hit that? So what I'm going to do to test is this is going to have the red part and this is going to be white afterwards. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this red and I'm not going to get any red on here, and I just want to see if there's like much of a difference in those two shades of brown, and that'll let me know just how layerable my stain colors are. So one thing I realized I did forget to do is I didn't do heat and my roll. So I really am going to do that now. So it's going to be squeaky. So feel free to just turn that volume down. If you join late, seriously turn it down. It sucks. Had like a little pull in my vinyl there on a stripe that I wanted to fix. And then you probably saw I kind of got to here with my roller, and then I jumped over here and came back and then rolled this last. So on my roller, I do find that I do pick up a little bit of stain, and I just need to be conscious of that. But I did that last so I wouldn't pick up stain and be like rolling it everywhere else. But in reality, those two stain colors are so similar that even if I did like kind of transfer a little bit, like you wouldn't notice, but just what I chose to do. So I think I got questions last time I did a video just asking about this. So I find the roller to be very convenient. One, when I'm like, I'm just laid down an entire sheet, I can just do kind of like, I don't know, I guess it's similar to a squeegee, but with like less pressure or something. I don't know. I just find it very convenient, and I like this. I assume a squeegee might be a little harder whenever I'm using the heat, because like this squeegee is like kind of like a little bit sharper and it's harder. I assume you could probably tear the vinyl a little simpler. I was just never really talented with the squeegee, and I got this really early on, so I haven't really used much of a squeegee, so I can't compare those two, but just a quick shout out in case anybody's curious about the roller. All right, let's do that second shade. All right, so here, like you're, especially with like a poly over or whatever, I'm not worried about bleed or anything. So I could technically glob that on, especially if they're very layerable colors. However, whatever effect you're getting like by the blending of colors is going to be amplified by how heavy you go. So I'm not going to do that because I do feel like I'm considering this to be a semi-layerable color, so I don't want to get extra red on that. But what I'm going to do is I will probably start on the vertical stripe with my wettest because I'm going with the grain. It's going to be the hardest to get the bleed there, so that's where I'm going to dry my little stain pad. So if anybody's just curious about like what happens with non-layerable stain colors without a magic eraser, earlier I was mentioning that like some builders are saying like a magic eraser helps, and then some people just say that you can layer certain colors and it doesn't affect it. I did do it in my last live video. It was this, you know what, all right, it was my last live video. It was a sports team with a star as their logo that is blue. And I showed what blue and brown look like layered. And I actually did a big mix-all tutorial in the middle of that video. It's gonna be helpful. I plan, because that video is so long, I plan to do a separate mix-all video just so you can just get the big benefit of the mix-all. But if you are curious about mix-all, I used mix-all to do blue, which seems to be the most common question in our group, at least, is like, what recipe do you use, what base stain? I used, I want to say I used 3 different base stains. I used Mix-All 99, which is ocean blue. I used Mix-All 9, which is blue, and Mix-All 11, which is violet. And I kind of showed those combinations. I fine-tuned them to try to get to my exact blue, which I freaking nailed. I'm really stoked I did that on camera. However, I did do a test of just like a remask next to a poly over those colors. And what a remask is, without getting into too much details, I completely protected each shade from the other, so there was no blending. So I got those 2 colors, like the true colors, next to each other. And then I did a poly over, and before I revealed the remask, the poly over actually kind of looked okay. And I would have said, hey, that works, let's go throw that on the board. But luckily I did it right next to a remask, and I got to reveal what it could have looked like, and the result was very significant. So I kind of went on about it there as well, but basically other people's opinions, like, just take it with a grain of salt, test everything that you can. Even what I'm saying, feel free to like test it, but I'm trying my best to just show you my tests and mistakes in front of you. But anyway, that was a really beneficial thing if you were curious about like how far you could really push poly over, or like what a fail might look like, or how you could even test it and prevent from wasting a set of boards by finding out the hard way. So like kind of like another example is I just now did my red over this brown, and honestly, if anything, it's like helping the brown get darker. I'm liking it. Like, cause I did this really dry and it didn't take super well. But I'm not seeing any sort of reddish tint. So in a small sample area, as well as like without it being next to a perfect, like kind of 2 colors butting up, like that is a full layer going across. The effect is smeared all the way across. So like it's kind of hard to get a grasp as to whether, like, what it would look like without the blending of colors. So so that is like why I'm gonna do it right here. So then I'll see the brown without the red next to the brown with the red to see if I want to like turn that red, which I'll probably do anyway, but it's just, that's the kind of idea that I would suggest with testing. So because this looks good and it would tell me like, oh, it's not affecting my red, but if I had more brown next to it that didn't get the red, it might end up kind of standing out, and that would be a bummer. Oh. Watch out. Another thing I'm doing to kind of make the test even bigger is I'm really just wiping on the line. I'm not trying to fully coat this brown just yet, because another thing that could kind of stand out is I want to see if I might have these like stray brush marks of red that like kind of stand out. I just want to see like how layerable these two colors are. And the reason I'm talking about testing for myself is up until like kind of recently, I thought black was like really layerable with browns. It's just you're going to kind of tint it a little bit. But I was using a black paint, and then I find that the brown stain did not like evenly coat the black paint, and it really kind of gets a little blotchy and weird. So now I'm going to be kind of rethinking the way that I incorporate blacks, because they are not getting tinted slightly brown the way I had it felt like I was getting in the past, because I had like smaller slivers of black. So like I couldn't notice those changes. So then whenever I started doing kind of like larger chunks of black with that's touching a lot of brown, it's like it started standing out pretty obnoxiously. So I am still experimenting with the colors that I use the most, even just to get used to them. So. All right. So I couldn't end up getting the wipes and stuff the way I was really going. It was like really dry, so I need more saturation, so I'm just going to go over it with a little bit more of a wet stain now. But I'm going to be sure to just try to thoroughly coat all of that brown that's on this side of the logo. And I can already tell it is definitely putting like a little bit of like this burgundy tint. Yeah, like that would be, I don't know, it's not ruining the brown, but like side by side with the area that doesn't have it, it looks pretty bad. So sorry. So sorry, the moral of that story is I'm gonna go over this with brown, or the reddish brown, and then just to be safe, I'm gonna do that area as well. It's so far away you wouldn't really see that contrast, but I know what effect I'm getting, so it's gonna be easy enough just to make it look good. All right. Hopefully we should be winding this thing down pretty good. So appreciate you bearing with me. I have to say I'm not super stoked on this contrast here. not much I can do on that. I don't know, we'll see. That's a bummer. If I don't have the contrast I'm looking for, really, like, I guess my only solution really would be to remask all of this later and try to mix a more reddish shade and kind of go back and just hit this reddish area with like an even redder component that I would use with mix all, but really hoping that it's just because I can't see the whole board. So that's, I don't know, it's a little frustrating. Hopefully it ends up being awesome though. All right. Can you maybe just confirm that the video is not like frozen or something? There's was a lot of chat before and now there's none. Just want to make sure I'm not just talking to myself out here. All right, so I had forgotten to put the red on top of that. Obviously, I caught that in time. What I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to do some poly on it. I'm going to just kind of hit it all, and then I'm going to weed up the inside area, and I'm going to do my last light shade of brown, and then I'm all done with this thing. What was I going to say? Okay, so I guess the reason I mentioned that is I almost polyed over this before I put that color down. That would have actually been fixable. The more common issue is like you kind of get in a hurry and then you just weed the next area before you do the poly. That would kind of screw you up pretty good, especially if you accidentally put down some of that poly. So just definitely take your time. It's kind of nerve-wracking trying to do a live video of it, as I feel like I am more prone to making mistakes. But just definitely take your time and really think through each time you break out the poly to make sure you're ready to do it. Like right here, you'll probably even see that my vinyl doesn't wrap around on the sides. Now it's going to be raw on the side, so I'm not concerned about it. But like you do want to be careful if like perhaps I have this, like my stencil would look the same if I was going to stain over there. So we'll just pretend like if that was going to have it, I would just want to make sure I'm spraying at this kind of an angle rather than like at this angle. Like, so same angle, but over here, my overspray is going to go off. Whereas right here, I'm going to be blasting the side with poly, and that would, if I were going to be staining there, it would be very obvious. So. So I guess we could talk about if you did poly an area that you plan to stain, I would say that the best course of action, if you just hit it kind of partially, would be just go ahead and make it like somewhat even all the way across. Sean Zander, one of the guys that's been chatting earlier, I don't know if he's still in here, he actually does that. He's not, I think he said he's going to stop it because he's not a huge fan of doing it that way, but like he does stain over top of poly to prevent any sort of bleed, but he has to use so many coats to build up the color to get there. So if you did put down poly on unstained wood and that you were planning to stain, if you just get it even, technically you could still get pretty close to the color that you intended to get, but you're going to have to do multiple coats. And then multiple coats of stain is not doing a coat and then just coming back and doing another. It would be doing a coat and letting it dry and then coming back and do another and build it up. Because if I came back and try to add more stain right now, it's just going to be the exact same result. It's just kind of moving the stain that's already there around. You're kind of intermixing it because it's still wet. It's not like layering on top of itself. So anyway, the best thing to do is just don't make that mistake to begin with, and then you'll be good. right. So I'm a vinyl waster. I will I will lay down a full stencil, pretty much whether I need to or not. So some people are very, very frugal with their vinyl. So a call out to look out for would be a design kind of like this. So this is all one big solid area that's gonna that I'm gonna be removing and I'm gonna be staining. One of the ways you could have done this stencil, and a way a frugal person would have done, is they would have laid this stencil, they would have laid that stencil, they would have laid that stencil, and then they would have taped off a line, which I don't know if you value your time, but like they would have spent a lot longer doing it. So the cost, which wouldn't have been that different to begin with, definitely got higher with their labor. So I urge you to waste vinyl. But anyway, doing it separately there, something to look out for is if I had done this in a separate piece of stencil here and then another one here, that means I didn't have any stencil right here, which seems like it would be okay, and sometimes it does work out to be totally fine. But the issue to look out for with things like that is this area and this area are going to end up being the exact same color, but this area would have had vinyl on it, which means the vinyl is pulling up the grain. So whatever situation the grain was in, it's like this stencil changed it. And oftentimes, especially on something like Baltic, you will see that line where the stencil was and over, like all where the vinyl is, it like altered the grain, and the way the stain takes ends up being like, it looks fine, but you see a transition area, and then you have two distinct different ways that the wood took the stain. So that's just something to kind of look out for there. And then I'm about to remove a bunch of vinyl, and I'm going to be going around every bit of detail that I had just stained. So the heat gun is going to be pretty crucial again. I'm going to come through and just kind of soften this, because the fiber pools are, this is going to be the time where I could really get it. I could get big fibers just getting pulled up with the vinyl, but like I've got just so much of all the detail I'm going around it. So you want to be careful. So I wanted to just get that vinyl to let go of that grain, so I'm going to use the heat gun. Good to see you, Mark. I do have another long, even longer video that I did last Sunday. You could check it out for another video on polyover. This one, I'm a little nervous about some of my color contrast, so I'm hoping it turns out okay, but all right, so I'm going to be buying a new heat gun. Turns out Harbor Freight was not the most durable brand I could have gotten. All right, so normally on Baltic, I probably would have just gone and would have just waited until I got the new heat gun, but honestly, this grain has been performing for me today pretty well on the fiber pool area, so I'm going to just risk it without the heat, because I think I'm going to be good. So another random call out is I kind of want to take off my gloves right now, because the vinyl is sticking to it a lot, and I'm a little nervous about getting stain on my fingers. But really, another thing to look out for this time of year is just sweat. Like my hands are pouring sweat. It's warm in my garage right now. Dripping sweat, or accidentally touching my finger or hand to the unstained wood, if you are kind of sweaty, will definitely show up whenever you stain your next color. You'll just have this like darker area. So maybe conscious of sweat. So I'm just not going to do it, because I know my hands are a little damp right now, so I just don't want to have like some fingerprints running around where I may accidentally touch the wood. you're not already doing it, an X-Acto knife is a great way to go back and clean up. So like I talked about earlier in the video, I had some issues when I laid down my stencil and I had like just little creases. So one of the creases came over to this line, and where it kind of folded, I don't have a straight line anymore. I just have like kind of like stains going up, and then all of a sudden it's over and the stains going. It's like super small, but what I can do is just kind of lightly scrape with my X-Acto, and can't see it. So I fixed that little error. I'm actually not seeing bleed and stuff, which is phenomenal. But like it really helps with bleed. So that would be more like surface bleed. So surface bleed would be like kind of like bleed that just stays on top of the surface of the wood that goes like maybe underneath your stencil where it wasn't applied well. That comes off so freaking easy. It's the kind of penetrating type bleed that you would get maybe in a cut line that, you know, or something like that, or the thinner, like kind of the liquid parts of the gel stain, like are seeping deeper. Those are much harder to get out. And the big lookout there is like you don't want to take away too much wood, because then you can just create like a whole new issue. I'm using Baltic, which has like a nice thick veneer, and then every layer is Baltic, which is cool. I'm definitely not going to get through a layer of it, but using cheaper wood, so like a Chinese birch, for example, has like a super thin veneer. And I went through a phase where I was using Chinese birch, and for some reason, whatever it is, like the next layer down, or I don't know if it's the glue or what, was like hot pink, and that would just kind of like pop through. So whenever you're cleaning up, you know, your bleed, you know, you just kind of expose that stuff, and you just kind of cause like a whole new issue. Like I didn't intend to have hot pink on my set, but to get rid of a little bit of a tiny bleed that probably wasn't noticeable to begin with, now I have hot pink just popping out. So just kind of look out for like, you know, the kind of damage you're doing there. If you do have to kind of go over a big area, just scrape in different directions to kind of like make it like a kind of like a whole bigger area, like kind of spread that out. If you had like a lot to remove, so it's not like kind of like a sliver coming out, because your poly doesn't necessarily fill those types of textures. It'll be there at the final result, so you might as well just kind of smooth it out a little bit if you can. All right, I talked about earlier, I had to kind of manually contour a border around some of these letters, and I'm seeing here like there are a couple issues I just need to clean up. So I apologize for the downtime, but I gotta make this look better real fast. All right, well, that was easier than I thought. All right, so I did do all my poly and stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and just do my last shade. This is gonna end up being raw, and I don't think I'm going to like accidentally stain over it or anything, but just to be safe, because I have made that mistake before, is I will still leave all that mask now, just in case I accidentally do a little drip or drop or something. Sometimes they just get a little carried away. So Skip, I'll talk while I'm working. So in the chat, Skip's asking about what I did to prep the boards, which means Skip is joining late and he did not watch this whole video. Hurts my feelings, Skip. So what I did is I actually water popped these boards, and I do kind of have a description of that at the very beginning of the video. I covered it, but basically I fully saturated the boards with water. You'll see that it'll shift it from this really light kind of white grain to like more of like a darker gold. It's just what wet is going to look like, which is very nice that the color changes, because then you can visibly see when it dries, because you don't want to sand before it dries. But basically I water popped it, which raises all the grain, so it's all sticking straight up. And then I did my normal sanding. So I did that before my sanding, so it was kind of the same amount of labor. I did do the water, and you're gonna end up waiting like 30 minutes for that to dry. I just did mine last night because I just set the boards out because I knew I was gonna do them today. So it really didn't cause me any downtime whatsoever. However, the benefit though is all the grain was up, and then I sanded it, and I find that it is a little smoother. But also, as I'm sure you're aware, whenever you go and you're applying poly, especially with a brush, you will feel all the fibers raise up. So that's going to happen at least one time with wood, sometimes a little more than one time, but like really it's typically just one time you get that raise with the moisture. So by water popping, you get that early. And then, so that means my poly stages are going to more than likely be very smooth. So I don't have like, since I still brush with a foam brush, I'm not going to have all this fibers just like destroying my foam brush and putting foam in my poly. So is that what you're asking about? I sanded to 400, by the way. 400, I find that I tend to be one of the few people doing 400. 320 seems to be more common. So whatever floats your boat. I do hear about people who do 220, but they also are the people who are, I usually find out they're doing 220 when they're asking about stain bleed. So personally, I like 400, but in 320 seems to be safe as well. But 220 I know is dangerous. So knowing that, I'm just staying at my 400, but I'm not saying you have to go that high. No, I'm just kidding, Skip. Thank you for coming by and watching at all. All right, so I'm going to be staining here. And so often what I've been doing, kind of got this tip from the group. It may have been started by Scott, actually, but what I do now is I'll stain to the edge, and then I'll go back and I'll round over the edge. But on this one, I'm going to have a raw unstained border going around the outside. And whenever you round over the end of a stain, it's going to give you like a very nice, clean, crisp stain line. But where I'm not going to have that effect going on the outside, I'm going to stain into my hole. That sounded inappropriate. But I'm going to stain all the way around the inside of the hole, and I did not round over the bottom. So then I will round that over afterwards, which from the top you might see that edge, but it'll be like a very nice defined end. I find it just really does give a professional appearance. Because it's kind of hard to like stop your stain super neatly without like, you know, just like a mask, which you can't really do on the hole super easily. So anyway, that's just like a little tip. I highlighted that in my last live video of the sports team with the blue star, and that's going to be on the thumbnail for the video. Oh man, this is darker than I expected. All right, this is nutmeg. So I will, all right, that's lightening it a bit. I will not be trying to build this up too much, but I will be trying to make sure I get nice and consistent. This is one of my first times using nutmeg. I think I've done it one other time. It is a great contrast shade. So like, I mean, it's definitely going to contrast. I found that like Java is the darkest brown, and then it goes down to walnut, and then you could do nutmeg, and then you could do new pine. So those are like great even steps. I typically, for something like this, have been doing cherry wood by Minwax, but I now no longer have Lowe's near me, and I thought I got it from Home Depot the other day, but I ended up getting cherry, and it was a liquid stain because I can't read. So anyway, I was hoping this is going to be super close. This does seem a little darker. So while you can, like on a layerable stain, just go over a previous shade without really affecting the color. The only benefit of the poly was just like protecting the first shade from being contacted directly by the second shade, because doing it while they're still wet kind of erases them. You still don't want to, like, especially with how hard I'm rubbing right now, to just make sure that I'm getting like nice and like thin. You don't really want to just be like going over a previous color like that for too long, because like your poly is not even cured, so you don't want to like just rub off that poly and then get into that previous shade. So so you could kind of like minimize that, but on the flip side, you're not wanting to go too like light around that edge, because then you do need to kind of build up that stain color. Like you don't want to like end up having like a light edge touching the darker edge, like where you're, you can kind of visibly tell that you're being careful and it looks pretty bad. So what I'm kind of doing here is like all of a sudden now these like certain little blemishes in the wood are popping out. Like there seems to be like some sort of indentation here. More than likely it was when I was moving sheets of ply, like the corner of one just drug across and just kind of like really indented that. So I'm seeing that, and then here I'm seeing some sort of weird smudgy looking thing that's like just light, like the stain's not taken super well there. So I'm trying to rub in more stain. But here for this line, what happened is it's basically like indented. It's like a scratch. Same thing would happen if you had like your razor blade and more stain is taking right there. So while I'm got my stain out, I can fix this if this doesn't work. But what I'm going to do is try to scrape it with my X-Acto and see if I can just like kind of remove some of that stain and lighten it and see if I can just get it to look consistent. It's not like a deal breaker or anything, but I don't need anything junking them up if I don't have to. I'm going pretty light with it. Like, I mean, I'm not really doing anything to the wood, but it definitely is making it less noticeable. But I do have these like kind of like raw, unstained like lines in it. Like it kind of looks like it's been scraped a little bit. So I'll probably still have to hit this with the stain, but I'm gonna just try to see if. All right, that didn't actually do anything. I'm right back to where I was before. It was worth a try. This, I don't know, maybe from sanding, but I do have these little areas that, you know, nothing was going on there with the vinyl, so I can rule out vinyl from being a culprit. I like to obsess over some of these little things just to see if I can kind of like figure out what it was I did wrong. So potentially sander, however, like I don't know, I didn't really go hard on it with sanding, but a big lookout with your sanding is like, you want to keep your orbital level the whole time, and you want to go over every area like kind of consistently. You will see like if you hover in an area, like, I mean, one, you could definitely burn through the veneer potentially on a lower grit, but you can kind of like just alter that area, especially if you ever even tilt your orbital. It just burns through really quick, and those areas will stick out because they won't take stain, but you'll just see these areas that they just will not take it. I don't know, I like to call it just compressing the grain. I don't know if that's really what's happening, but something's happening and it's not absorbing stain there anymore. So I don't know, I'm just trying to see if I can explain any of these little flaws. Where it's easiest to do that would be your roundovers. So that's another benefit of that stain method I was talking about, where you stain to the edge of an unrounded piece of ply and then round over afterwards. Is it does, well, I mean, like you don't have the sanding issues on the roundover. So here I did round over, but luckily I'm not sanding the roundover, but I did have a roundover here on the hole that I'm sanding. And so I didn't take my orbital around the hole. I did that part by hand, kind of gently. An orbital going over a roundover is kind of the same as tilting an orbital. It's just really compressing that. So what you'll see is it'll be like nice consistent stain, and then that hole, just like that little lip, just doesn't even take stain. So it just has like a weird line to it. So all right, let's peel this off. I gotta say, I'm not real stoked on these, so this is kind of unfortunate, but we'll see. Hopefully it will look better once it's exposed wood and not off-color vinyl. it looks better, but it's still not exactly what I had envisioned. I got some cleanup here, but it kind of has more of a purple hue than like a reddish. So anyway, that's what I ended up with. Not the best. I will brainstorm on some stuff here. So things I'll be kind of considering. So did not get the quite the amount of contrast I was really looking for. Like the name's getting a little faint there, but really like the purple shade is my that's probably like my biggest issue with it. So I will probably be brainstorming that and trying to come up with some solutions, but it might involve like a remask where I'm going to do like more of a reddish stain over top and see if I can bring out some red. I don't know. We'll chew on that. It might grow on me. Who knows? But deal with that another time. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much for joining me. I do plan to be doing a team that has green and yellow either tomorrow or the next day. So if you're not subscribed but you want to see some mix-all, I do plan on doing a mix-all session. And I also plan on tackling how I'm going to do those two colors next to each other. So I'm going to experiment with the magic eraser that I've heard about. So the magic eraser is for a poly over. I'm told, I've not tested this, that the if you do the magic eraser over the area that had poly on it after you do the next shade, it might remove it to where like it looked like, you know, just gets rid of that like kind of second layer effect. I did have someone tell me it was not absolutely perfect, which makes me think that it might not be the method I'm going to go with, but I'm going to test it and kind of see if I can debunk that thing or see if it's like my new favorite tool. And then if that does not work, I will be doing a remask then. So in preparation, I've already cut the masks to remask it, but that would be a way of staining two colors that don't layer. So if you're interested in seeing any of that, just make sure you're subscribed and turn on those notifications. But thank you guys so much. I don't know, really appreciate it. The video will be on there to look back on if you're interested. I did try to type in the chat. The chat is different from comments, but you, whenever you're replaying the video, should be able to see that. Skip to the very end and you can see the entire chat log. I did asterisks and full caps on all my comments, so you should be able to go back and see, like whenever I said poly, you know, coat 1, you knew I was spraying poly right there. So I typed it right before I did it, so you can kind of reference that stuff. Hoping that helps, but if you have any tips on what I could have done differently in this video for these future ones to make them more productive, let me know. These are geared toward, one, I'm just trying to fully explain the process. So I want this video, so if someone says like, what's poly over? Boom, here's a video where I'm gonna take you through it. I do have my short, simple video. It's the 4 methods of touching stain colors to just explain what something is and show you real quick how it works. It's in a time lapse. But I also have other, and that works for me, for example. However, I do have other people and they just want to see it. And they I think I even saw a comment this week that they said as soon as they see the faster video, they just turn it off because it's like you're not really getting a sense of what's truly happening. And I totally understand that. So that is what I'm trying to accomplish here is I want to take you along with it. I want to explain absolutely everything I'm doing and just kind of assume as little as possible with it. Like I don't want to just like assume you have certain information coming in. So yeah, it might be a little frustrating if you already know what I'm talking about. And I apologize for how wordy I am, but I'm just trying to provide that info. So I'd love to know what you think. If you're more experienced and you already know the stuff that I'm doing, that feedback, I already know what that would be like, but it's more like the guys looking for that additional information and stuff. I'd love to know what you all think so I can try to do a better one on these next few that I have planned. Thanks for joining me. I'm glad I didn't get any stain on my University of Tennessee anti-bullying t-shirt. I don't know if you know the story on this. Some kid went to school in Florida and they had a college t-shirt day And the kid was, from what I understand, low income, and he drew this design onto a piece of paper and pinned it on his shirt, and he got bullied by the other kids, and his teacher felt so bad about it, she posted it on social media. I think it was on Facebook, and it got around to University of Tennessee, and they ended up giving the kid full scholarship. And then they started making these shirts, and I don't know, I think by the time I bought it, which I bought it as soon as I found out they were making them, they'd already sold like 90,000. So I don't know, I think that's pretty awesome, and I'm glad to represent that kid and his freaking free education. I don't know, good for him. Those bullies kind of got showed what's up. Anyway, thank you guys. Have a good night. Got to figure out how to turn this thing off. This is awkward.